Hello, everyone, and welcome to Humble Beginnings Ministries. I'm your host, Pastor Stephen Woods. And, today we want to really kind of dive into something. I came across a podcaster by the name of Chad O. Jackson. And to be honest with you, his content has really, truly brought some things to the forefront. Most importantly, there's pastors out there such as Pastor Jamal Bryant and the pastor of Alfred Street Baptist Church, who seem to fit the mold of this modern day Martin Luther King type. They have that mentality of Martin Luther King. Many in the Black community deem Martin Luther King, or I should say some rather, deem him as a hero. But in the words of Chad O. Jackson, Martin Luther King was not a hero by any of the means. I've talked to other Black or African American men who I deem as examples who have been a blessing in my life. Before we get into it, I'd just like to say like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and so that you can stay up with the latest reaction. And so what we're about to talk about today, what Chad O. Jackson is going to talk about today, really hits home on the core values of what it looks like as an African American man or a Black man to see things from the perspective that I believe is never really, I want to say, is the perspective that's not common when it's looked at, because a lot of the pastors out there who are standing in the pulpit really are doing an injustice to the progress of the Black man. So at this time, without further ado, I'd like to say, let's go into the video where Chad O. Jackson is going to discuss how Martin Luther King was no hero. Let's go into that.
Friends with a colored girl, and as children have no prejudice, we became very close friends.
Interracial commissions were set up in the South, and these commissions were composed of responsible white and Negro leaders in the South. And they were doing a pretty good job. When there was friction between the two groups, they sought to find a solution. They sought to find a solution. And as a result of it, much of the progress that has been made in establishing good relations in the South can be laid at the door of the interracial commission that functioned in the South and enjoyed considerable respect and prestige.
I would not let that determine whether I become friend to them by their color. I have found several colored people that I have enjoyed their friendship.
The South built...
So the truth is, nobody's denying that racism ever existed. But there is an extremism that some are trying to, they're creating this narrative that they just, again, they take certain scriptures and they try to twist it to fit their narrative, to fit their idea in their minds of why they cannot progress in life.
Many new schools, many of them far superior to those that were attended by white children.
Do the best that you can with your life. You are unique. You have a contribution to make. You have something to offer. Schools had a heavy reinforcement into our characters because they were Black schools. Schools were not integrated at that time.
Now, the NAACP has gotten a token number of Negroes integrated in schools. They consider that a great victory. But I say it's a Pyrrhic victory. What is significant that this whole integration campaign coincided with Russia's stepped-up campaign in Africa and Asia. The races were getting along too well and beginning to solve their problems. Negroes were getting jobs they never held before. Things were getting along pretty smoothly. Now everything is just topsy-turvy now. The Reds started all of this integration stuff because they wanted the Negro to unite with the white communists. That was their objective, not with the other white people, but with the white communists. And as a result, they have destroyed all pride amongst them.
Here's the thing. If you really look into it, Martin Luther King didn't realize, or I'm pretty sure maybe he did, he was pretty educated, that a lot of his values were Marxist. They were communist. Even though so many know him as quote unquote being a Christian, he would take certain biblical truths, twist them, and then utilize them in a fashion. He would form them in a fashion that was unbiblical. So really, Martin Luther King's worldview was not really intact with what biblical principles would suggest. Now, if you heard, as you heard in this video, he began to say that basically the white communists and the black man were at peace with one another, and that's what they wanted, and that wasn't good enough. So while many people trump Martin Luther King as being one to suggest racial equality, there was really something deeper that he was trying to achieve.
I've always asked, has integration helped to harm the black community?
Knocked the black folks' brains out. Black folk had up 100 times more before social integration hit. We weren't looking for any social integration. You know why? Because we had our own businesses there.
And therein lies the truth. While so many modern black men are touting this whole idea, in fact, black men did have their own businesses. Many of you may or may not have known of Black Wall Street and what all happened to that, right? And if you don't, that's a really good topic to really go and really study out, because the black man was very wealthy at one time. And so this whole thing of idea about reparations and how integration in the mind of the black man, I mean, even so to the point where even in our inner cities, a lot of the delicatessens and the corner stores were owned by black men. And now where are they mostly owned by? Muslims.
Our own cab companies, we had our own restaurants, we had our own hotels, we had our own school systems. My family was part of one that had the only black bus line in the entire United States. And when I say we had a bus line, I'm not talking about 2 or 3 buses. We had over 500 buses.
Wow.
In Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We had that from 1927 up to about 1967.
And that's what gets you about today's, a lot of the pastors like Jamal Bryant, I'm going to say activists, Jamal Bryant and others. And I want to show you something that later on that is really, it really shows that some of these younger baby boomer black men are still holding on to some of the ideologies that were held during the time of Martin Luther King, but with a different spin, like, you owe me this, you owe me that. No, go own your own business. Do what you need to do.
We own the buses. Mm-hmm. We own the resource. All of our mechanics were blacks. All of our drivers were blacks. Electricians were black. Everything was black. We don't kill our buses.
Right.
Social integration. When all of a sudden you all start talking about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King going down to Alabama, want to integrate the bus lines. Integrate whose bus lines?
I have always ridden in the back of the bus because I didn't have guts to get in the front of the bus. But now the time had come. I was riding in the front of the bus.
Blacks in Winston-Salem says, we want to ride on fronts of white buses. So we said, we don't have any white buses. They said, well, we'll get some so we can ride on the front of them.
We have got to the point.
So you see, this is an eye-opener from what a lot of people are not willing to really talk about or address. And that's facts right there.
Complete asshole, because I never thought about that. Like that whole time they did the boycott, they should have been trying to establish their own bus company
Ownership.
as opposed to wanting to ride. I never thought about that. Y'all boycotted for a year just to want to ride on the front?
But they already had bus companies. And so it's like, why in the world do you want to regress? What is, and this man is telling the truth.
See, you're a smart man.
I never thought about that.
They don't want any more Negro business, and that Negro business which exists, they say that should be integrated. They do not want to build anything, and they have nothing to offer to any other group. But they want to force themselves everywhere, and as a result, they create friction.
Our new generation was no longer willing to go slow as our parents were. We turned our backs on legalism. It was too slow. We preferred to use with new energy the classic tools of more active riding and sitting in for freedom, for first-class citizenship. We made sure our voice was heard.
Dr. J.H. Jackson has warned constantly that communists are directing the revolutionary activities of the radical black power element in America.
He says he represents the Negro. He does not represent anybody but himself. He is looking for security. That's what our elders are looking for. But we do not want security.
Many of the students work with Dr. Martin Luther King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
We have utterly pushed aside the old stymied adult Negro leadership in the South, and we have organized ourselves into student groups, into student protest, nonviolent protest groups, and we have seen real change in the South within the past year and a half.
It was sort of something that you were caught up in a storm. You know, you walked out one day and the wind was blowing and the rain was coming down and everybody around you was talking about the movement. And whether you wanted to or not, you had to pay attention to it, and I did.
I didn't understand a lot of the whole economic issues, and there was a lot of naivete in it, but it was also a wonderful dream.
Integration was never an issue for me or for many others, but it was the issue that I think separated me from the civil rights movement.
What a lot of people fail to understand about Jim Crow is that what Jim Crow was state-mandated segregation. In other words, the state trying to play a role in determining where blacks can go and where whites can go.
I think that forced racial segregation is criminal and unconstitutional, and I think forced racial integration is criminal and unconstitutional. I think either one of them is cruel.
Many people, both black and white, understood, just as Governor Maddox did, that it is not only volatile, but actually unconstitutional for the government to force segregation, and by the same token, for the government to force.
Do you see that headline? Muslim sect terrorists hold many hostages in Washington attack. And the whole idea that he's saying is just so eye-opening about a lot of those communist ways. Honestly, they come from Muslim roots. A lot of times when you see a Muslim authority or leadership, a lot of their values are communistic.
Integration.
Any effort to force integration upon whites is actually hypocritical. If a white man puts his arm around me voluntarily, that's brotherhood. But if you hold a gun on him and make him embrace me and pretend to be friendly or brotherly toward me, then that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy.
That's right. And that is so true.
America is trying to do is pass laws to force whites to pretend that they want Negroes into their schools or in their places of employment. Well, this is hypocrisy, and this makes a worse relationship between black and white, rather than if this could be brought about on a voluntary basis.
The NAACP, Martin Luther King, and the Johnson administration collaborated together to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which in their mind would go ahead and force integration anyway. The journalists in the 60s were themselves advocates for social.
So it's obvious Martin Luther King should have known this information. So it really shines a light on his motive as to why he was doing what he was doing.
Social justice. And so naturally, they did everything they can to emphasize and highlight so-called leaders of the civil rights movement.
Segregation to the average Negro means being held back. He's looking for progress. He wants to move forward in the American mainstream. Segregation holds him back.
What they didn't tell you is that there was a vast disconnect between the NAACP and ordinary working class black men on the question of integration.
Up to this present time, it hasn't affected me at all. As far as my work and my social activities, up until this present time, I can say it hasn't affected me.
These are strong-willed, proud men.
And that's what it goes to show you. A lot of this stuff, this narrative that a lot of these pastors are trying to perpetrate over the pulpit, it's a farce. And it's about time that they are exposed. This whole idea of reparations and all this, they want to follow the NAACP and all that garbage. Man, sit down somewhere. Even the working class black man wasn't even concerned or even bothered by this. Why? Because they were making money. They had their own businesses. They were successful.
Who didn't see their dignity tied up in what white people thought about them or whether or not white people accepted them. King was able to do what Saul Alinsky later writes about in his book Rules for Radicals, where he says the revolutionary organizer must create disenchantment and discontent. King was obviously able to do that rhetorically with his To America speech, where he painted this picture of Black America, which was completely different than the actual lived experiences that most Black people had at the time.
Oh man, look at that. Martin Luther King was a puppet used to achieve an agenda. And that's why it's great that we can be able to go back and take a look truly at how everything really was during that time.
There are literally...
People are good or clever at writing an alternative narrative. It's done today, even amongst a lot of activists, such as Jamal Bryant and Alfred Street Baptist pastor. They still want to take scripture and act like they were the ones or are the ones who are enslaved, or that they were the slaves in the Bible. And that's eisegesis. You're taking it out of context. Even to the point where they would take their own Black history and say, that was me. Like, there's an alter ego here where the Black man is who I am. And again, the Black men of their time did not care whether or not they were integrated with the white man. Their identity was not in that. And so many today, again, they're not pushing for integration with the white man, but they're pushing to say, why should I? They're not pushing for integration. They're pushing for, I want to take from the white man. I want to take what I believe belongs to me by way of reparations, by way of they want to turn it into law that the white man gives so much to black colleges or to this or that. They're trying to follow the same narrative that is really based off of this agenda, this communist agenda, I might add, and try to enforce it. The fact of the matter is, these activists will play off of anything or any opportunity to try to achieve their main goal. When first and foremost, I'm sure that a lot of them are really trying to go back to say, well, my grandma or great-great-great-grandmother was living during that time. And maybe rightly so. But the fact of the matter is, this whole idea of reparations and this whole idea is it's a farce. And when you give it too much attention, what it is that you find exactly what we have today.
Two Americas.
Which is division and strife. Go start your own corporation. Go start your own business.
The American Negro walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. And they find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty.
Which was a lie, because as we just seen, a lot of them were restaurant owners, business owners, all those things. They didn't lack the ability or the economy to be successful.
In the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity.
This new depiction, in a sense, subjected black people to what white people were willing to do for them, how white people were willing to vote, what the government was willing to do. In the eyes of the larger society, it made black people look desperate. It made people feel that black people's dignity really is tied up in what white people do. This all played a part in emotionalizing people to join the ranks of the civil.
Do you hear that? Emotionalizing people. And that's what they play on. Emotion. MLK sold them a bill of goods.
Civil rights movement.
Some of the liberals and the communists and all of that ilk, along with NAACP leaders, have been demanding more and more federal power. They want to take away all power from the states. And when this sort of thing happens, then we're on the road to dictatorship. And once you have given the federal government that power, it can be used against you. Depends upon who seizes control of the federal government.
I might say, Bill, this is my chief worry, that we have put so much power in the office of the presidency that someday the wrong man could come along.
I'm beginning a new effort to fix as much of our immigration system as I can on my own, without Congress.
And I wouldn't be so concerned about whether he could use these powers to perpetuate himself in office, but how he would use these powers to destroy people that disagreed with him.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't black.
To pile up voters where voters don't usually pile up.
Senator Bernie Sanders said he supported voting rights for felons in prison, including the worst of the worst.
I think Johnson is fully aware of the powers that he has, and he certainly has used them and will use them. We should be constantly encouraging the Congress to go slow, take it easy, study, research. We should be investing private funds of foundations, which are being wasted, in my opinion, too much on things that are not strictly American.
And that's so true. That is a big majority of the problem, where they don't focus on things that are strictly American. And that's where we can end up in a whole world of trouble.
American history is so complex. Even how we understand our history is complex.
Protesters were out today pushing for the removal of a statue at Columbus Park.
This symbol must come down.
When conservatives are trying to stave off the left as they come for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, their sort of defense will be, well, at that time period, everybody owned slaves, and we're the first country to abolish slavery, and, you know, these types of things.
The American Revolution caused people to question slavery. That birthed abolition movements.
I was very offended for him to say that nobody criticized slavery until the slave-holding American founding fathers decided to raise it. Disqualifies 200.
When progressives raise the slave-holding legacy of our founding fathers to conservatives, the conservative response is generally, these are men of their times and they have to be understood as such. But some of the same conservatives will turn around and indict King and say his views are so incompatible with the American founding and our principles that we should reconsider the extent to which we lionize him.
The whole reason that we even lionize or popularize someone like a Martin Luther King, who, by the way, was an all-out Marxist, who didn't...
Thank you. He was a Marxist. Say what you will. He was no Christian. He was a Marxist who held Marxist beliefs. He may have quoted the Bible, but he was not a man of God.
didn't believe in God. He said so in his own papers, that he did not believe in the resurrection of the Christ.
Whoa. Sit down somewhere, Jamal. Sit down somewhere, Alfred Baptist Church, Crosby. You're iconic. Your icon, who you just love to talk about and exploit for your own benefit, didn't even believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which tells the story of why a lot of these men defect.
That's very strange for someone who professes to be a Christian pastor. He didn't write any of his speeches. His dissertation was plagiarized. Those in his inner circle.
So he was a liar.
His speechwriters were themselves communists. Stanley Levison was a treasurer for a communist front group in New York. Bayard Rustin was a communist. He's the one who taught Martin Luther King the strategy of nonviolence. He was a concoction.
Absolutely.
To me, it's logically inconsistent to say that the slave master should be given due deference and have his positions analyzed with a sense of nuance. But the commie is once and for all and forever will be outside of the bounds of any type of respect and honor in terms of our political history. I can certainly more so understand why a Southern Baptist preacher who is maybe 2 generations removed from slavery would be in favor of Marxism than I can the co-founders of BLM in 2016. I'm not saying I agree with King's economic philosophy, but I understand why he would have it.
Well, touche. But the reality is that Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement served in America as a kind of Marxist Trojan horse. From the outside, it appeared to be moderate and pro-American.
And that's where these activists go wrong in the pulpit. If you're following an ideology of Jamal and the pastor of Alfred Street Baptist, that's what you have. They've gotten on the horse that Martin Luther King has gotten off of and is trying to finish the job.
This is a gift. We should take it to the temple of Poseidon.
And it's for this reason that America accepted it. But when you look at the results that followed, which were intentional, an expanded government, various socialist policies, a heightened welfare state, the facts reveal that this wasn't ignorance, but malice. They quite literally wanted to Sovietize America. In a 1965 interview, Bettina Aptheker said that the American political landscape is the perfect one for communism because Americans believe that they live in a democracy.
Communist philosophy or socialism easily and has to adapt to the country in which it's taking place. In this country, there will never be socialism unless the overwhelming majority of the American people passionately want it, and want it so badly that they're going to go out and get it. It's one of the things that gets me so excited when I start thinking about the possibilities of socialism in this country. The civil rights movement has already begun to develop a certain program. It is revolutionary, and it is also, I think, much more democratic.
So you can democratize social issues, and you can, in a sense, pull out the heartstrings of America. They will then let their guard down, and they will democratize socialism into reality. And so I don't see Martin Luther King fighting against that. I see Martin Luther King as a participant in that, which is a subversive thing.
It seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for...
So MLK was a puppet for this Marxist socialist agenda. And he played the part. But you know what? Today, you have people who have picked up that quote-unquote baton and are still steadily trying to push their way forward in that direction. That's what goes to show you that you have to really truly know who's laboring among you. And the fact that Martin Luther King was who he was, now it makes sense why he had extramarital affairs. He didn't believe in Jesus Christ and his resurrection. He may have believed he existed, but that his resurrection was not real.
The guaranteed annual income began to organize...
The question arises, well, what other options did he have? Well, for me, I think one of the reasons why there's such a mental block for people is because we've all went to the same schools. We all graduated from the same schools. We all read the same textbooks. You know, we all understand how MLK was this good moral leader who came to, in a sense, deconstruct the way things were. And there was no one else. No one else knew how to do it. But Martin Luther King, here's a guy who got it. And he was a Christian pastor, and he was all these things. Much of what we have learned about him turned out to be either false or inaccurate or, you know, a myth or what have you.
I didn't think I'd ever...
So, again, where did this all stem from? The school systems. How did socialism and some of those ideas spread so quickly? From generation to generation, children were being groomed to believe a certain narrative that was absolutely not true, myself included.
Dr. J.H. Jackson, head of the largest Negro church organization in America, the National Baptist Convention USA, with nearly 7 million members, has warned constantly that communists are directing the revolutionary activities of the radical black power.
There were other people like Joseph H. Jackson who believed in the fundamental Christian gospel, not the social gospel, not liberation theology, the fundamental Christian gospel, the inerrancy of the scriptures, the resurrection of Christ. Like, he believed in those things fundamentally.
What is your feelings toward the new black theology?
Those of us who are Christians.
So that the new black theology was adopted by this communist, socialist, Marxist MLK, and he was poisoning other black people who were willing to give it an ear and follow it. That same ideology is uttered on Sunday mornings in places like New Birth Missionary Baptist Church and others alike that affirm those ideas. Say what you will, it may have kind of evolved. I'm not saying that Jamal doesn't believe in the resurrection of Christ, but it's the idolatry of the black man, the idolatry, the idolatry of skin color. That's what it's turned into, and that's what we have to be careful about.
We don't believe that you can have a theory of God, based on color. I don't believe
When you look at his
matter.
engagement in civil rights, it wasn't this same brand of civil rights that MLK was pushing, in that we vest certain unconstitutional powers in the federal government, which widens that power and in a sense usurps our rights as Americans. Because, to Bob Woodson's point, we shouldn't have given the federal government the right to force businesses to integrate. Rather, we should have merely taken away the state's right to segregate.
Integration was never our goal. We never saw integration as a solution to the problems. We were seeking desegregation. And I think confusion on that point has continued to erode the collective self-confidence of the black community today. So integration was never an issue for me or for many others, but it was the issue that I think separated me from the civil rights movement.
Both the problem and MLK's solution are unconstitutional, says Bob Woodson, says Barry Goldwater, and many others, even Malcolm X, ironically.
Any effort to force integration upon whites is actually hypocritical. There's a form of hypocrisy involved. If a white man puts his arm around me voluntarily, that's brotherhood. But if you hold a gun on him and make him embrace me and pretend to be friendly or brotherly toward me, then that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy.
When I look at someone like a Joseph H.
And that's right. That's why it's important. I would rather have the brotherhood and it be authentic rather than the forced. And that's what a lot of people don't quite understand. So now you have this militant Marxist uprising of a black community, not the majority, but the minority, even though there may be thousands now who want to be more militant than they do anything else, because they don't realize they're pushing the agenda that would destroy the country and destroy the ability to go about the changes that which they're trying to achieve.
Jackson, he argued that to the extent that the white man doesn't give you a job, it's incumbent upon you to build your own businesses and to hire your brother and your sister and your neighbor, that you aren't begging someone else for a job. And so he didn't only talk about this, but he exemplified this. There were a bunch of sharecroppers in the South who were getting cheated by farmers. Jackson was the president of the National Baptist Convention. The convention bought 400 acres of farmland in the South, and they allowed these black sharecroppers to work the land for free. And to the extent that they raised money for their crops, they got to keep and pocket that money so long as they were saving that money to buy their own farmland, so they can move from sharecroppers to farmers and not have to depend on anybody else for their daily bread. The convention, under the behest of Jackson, did many of these things.
And I used to always ask the question, why don't we teach our children to have their own businesses, to have their own, to work hard? That has left, and now we want reparations. We want free money. When there's so much opportunity out there. And when the problem is with the narrative of MLK and a lot of these other pastors, there's not that hard work and that ethic, that work ethic that is important.
Now, the reason why I bring up Jackson in comparison to Martin Luther King is because, as you know, Ebenezer Baptist Church was under the umbrella of the National Baptist Convention. Martin Luther King, fresh out of Crozer, very young, very ambitious, he wanted to be the president of the National Baptist Convention. He was overwhelmingly rejected, and it got pretty contentious. Someone was pushed off a stage and died. Someone from Martin Luther King's little ilk pushed this young man off the stage and he died. So it got pretty contentious, and they ended up kicking Martin Luther King and his friends out of the National Baptist Convention. This was before his face was plastered on Time magazine and all the rest of it. So what they decided to do, at the suggestion of Stanley Levison, was start a new Baptist convention which would rival the National Baptist Convention. So they started the Progressive National Baptist Convention. Of course, it didn't take off. It didn't do anything. So they started this Southern Leadership Conference, and then they moved from there to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So the Southern Christian Leadership.
So Martin Luther King rode the back of Christianity, or had the title of a Christian, but he didn't hold to Christian values.
Leadership Conference and its concoction was the result of the fact that Martin Luther King and his campaign was not popular to these Negroes in the South as much as Joseph H. Jackson, who was a continuation of the kinds of things that Booker T. Washington talked about. Martin Luther King wanted to move the National Baptist Convention into a new, more radical, if I can use that word, social gospel, and to get away from the kind of fundamental gospel that Joseph H. Jackson and his ilk was preaching. He failed to do so, started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The advantage that Martin Luther King and his ilk had that Joseph H. Jackson did not have is that once the success of the Montgomery bus boycott took off and all the things, the media basically swarmed around Martin Luther King. They made him larger than life. Stanley Levison, who was a phenomenal publicist, he's the one who lined up the interviews, who was able to mobilize the media to put cameras in front of the civil rights movement under the behest of Martin Luther King, and the rest is history. And so Joseph H. Jackson was all but erased from these kinds of conversations that we talk about. It always comes down to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
If you're a man.
So, again, if you don't have the knowledge or you're not aware, it's one thing if you're ignorant to these situations. But the truth is coming out. MLK was not the Christian icon that should be held or esteemed in the Black community because he did not believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ in the fundamental way of understanding.
Others were trying to wrestle away their right to independence, not by way of deception, but by way of laying it all out on the table. They issued a Declaration of Independence, said this is what we do not like about our leadership, about our government, and we are going to go to war to fight for our freedom. Martin Luther King and his ilk didn't so much issue a similar kind of Declaration of Independence. A lot of the things that he did for which he is lionized, if it's true that those things were done as a subversive tactic, is it then fair to compare him to someone like the Founding Fathers?
As is always the case, whenever I see something that you produce, I'm learning a lot. I wasn't particularly familiar with Joseph H. Jackson, so that'll give me some homework to do. I think the comparison to the Founding Fathers is fair in that in life, a man's creeds often at various points in his life will not match his deeds. And yes, did the Founding Fathers struggle with slavery? Sure, to some extent. But I'm not a person that says, oh, we need a new founding, we need new national symbols, because I understand that people are flawed. And I'm not arrogant enough to think that because those men had their moral inconsistencies, that we in our generation don't have our own. I do not agree with lionizing or deifying any person. But I think we should deal with everyone's legacy openly, honestly, and consistently. And that is where I tend to come down on these things.
And you know what? That's exactly what has happened. People have deified Martin Luther King as though he's a god. And it happens in many different circles. This is just one example. But it's so important because of the narrative that's being pushed in a lot of Christian circles today. A lot of pastors are under people are under the leadership of these pastors who are deifying even their own color, their own race. And so this is a call to the body of Christ to embrace fundamental biblical principles. The Word of God is inerrant. It's without error. We are to, as the people of God, follow God, serve Him, love God, and love each other. That doesn't matter if you're black, white, Native American, Hispanic, Arabic, Asian, Indian. No matter what nationality or heritage you have, praise be unto God for that heritage. Praise be unto God for that, that God has raised you to be black or to be Native American or Arabic or whatever would have you, white, whatever. But what it all boils down to is we must go back to the real gospel and forsake the social gospel. I have been so blessed by Chad O. Jackson, and shout out to him and his channel. And if you are not subscribe to his channel. I have subscribed to his channel because he brings he makes a whole lot of sense out of what the things that is being stated. And so I'm grateful. As you can see there, I am subscribed to his channel. I'm just so grateful for that. I want to say thank you for tuning into the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Until the next video, God bless. Have a wonderful day and be blessed until the next time.